Socrates famously claimed that no one knowingly does wrong. He basically believed that if we truly understood what was good for us, we just do it. Sounds logical, right? Yet, every single day, millions of us sit down at our desks, stare at an absolutely crucial task, and then actively choose to fall down a Wikipedia rabbit hole, endlessly refresh our feeds, or suddenly decide that the bathroom grout needs immediate scrubbing. We know for a fact it's going to hurt us later, but we do it anyway. So why do we actively choose to delay? All right, let's dive right into this explainer from friction to flow. Today, we're taking a really structured, diagnostic journey into the human mind. We're going to deconstruct the exact mechanics of why we procrastinate, how it actually represents a fundamental breakdown in our self-regulation, and most importantly, how we can use the science of emotion regulation to grab the steering wheel back. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the procrastination trap, uncover why we really delay, and look at our 3 basic needs. Then we'll get into the emotion regulation engine, break down Gross's 5 strategic interventions, and finally look at thriving under pressure. Let's get to it. Section 1. The procrastination trap, the high cost of delay. We love to joke about procrastination, right? We kind of write it off as just a quirky habit or, poor time management. But research actually shows it's a fundamental failure of self-regulation. In one study, they asked undergrads about the factors that negatively impact their success and livelihood, and a staggering 92% cited procrastination. 92%! This isn't just some fringe issue. It is a massive, systemic barrier to achieving our goals. And the costs? They ripple out way beyond just getting a bad grade on a test. Habitual delay severely impacts literally every domain of our lives. Lower job performance turns into missed bill payments, which compounds into financial penalties. We even put off getting medical care. Psychologically, it creates this vicious cycle of stress and anxiety. And socially, it just drains trust from our relationships because, we become unreliable. It's just a massive tax on our overall well-being. Moving on to Section 2, why we really delay, the temporal motivation theory. So we know the symptoms and we know the costs, but to figure out the why, we have to look deeper into the mechanics of human motivation through what's called temporal motivation theory. Basically, humans are hardwired for something behavioral scientists call hyperbolic discounting. We irrationally devalue delayed rewards. If a task has a really distant reward, like getting your degree or saving up for retirement, we heavily discount its value today. That distant success simply cannot compete with the instant dopamine hit of a Netflix binge or scrolling through social media. At least not unless we actively step in and intervene. Section 3. Our 3 basic needs, the engine of motivation. Okay, to fix these self-regulatory breakdowns, we need to understand what actually drives intrinsic motivation in the first place. For this, we look to self-determination theory, which says we're optimally motivated when 3 basic psychological needs are met. Step 1 is autonomy. Now, this doesn't mean just flying solo and ignoring everyone else. It means acting with a sense of ownership, choice, and volition. Even if you're doing something your boss told you to do, you still feel a sense of choice in how you do it. Step 2 is competence. This is that need to feel mastery over your environment, to take on challenges and actually build your skills. And step 3 is relatedness. That's the fundamental human need to feel connected, cared for, and part of a broader group. These 3 things, they are the absolute basic nutrients for psychological growth. What makes this theory so fascinating is that these needs are innate. You don't acquire them over time. You're born with them. And crucially, they have to be balanced. If any single one of these is thwarted, say you feel chronically micromanaged, completely incompetent, or totally isolated, your intrinsic motivation gets completely undermined. And when that collapses, that's when we experience self-regulatory failure. And boom, we procrastinate. All right, Section 4, the emotion regulation engine, taking the steering wheel. So how do we fix this? When our basic needs are challenged, or when a task just feels way too demanding, we experience negative emotions. Stress, anxiety, dread. How we manage those specific feelings dictates whether we sit down and get to work or whether we run for the hills. Let's define what we're actually talking about here. Emotion regulation is simply your ability to influence which emotions you have, when you have them, and how you experience and express them. And let me be absolutely clear, this is not about emotional numbness. We aren't trying to be robots. This is about using skills to notice, name, and shape your emotions so you can keep a level head under stress, pressure, and uncertainty. Generally speaking, there are 2 main ways to regulate. You've got antecedent-focused strategies, which act before the emotion is fully formed. Because you're stepping in and shaping the process early, it costs way less mental energy. Then you have response-focused strategies, which act after the emotion is already hot and active. Now, these can still help, but you're working against a live, firing emotional reaction, and that takes a massive amount of willpower and energy to suppress or modulate. Section 5, Gross's 5 strategic interventions, the process model. Let's look at how this builds into a truly practical toolkit. Stanford psychologist James Gross developed what he calls the process model, which is honestly like the ultimate life hack toolkit for emotional agility. He mapped out how emotions actually unfold chronologically, and because they unfold over time, we have these distinct, specific entry points to intercept them. Regulation can happen at 5 points: before a situation even starts, inside a situation, through where we focus our attention, through how we appraise or judge the situation, and finally, after the emotional response has already begun. Let's map Gross's 5 strategies directly onto that timeline. First up is situation selection. You act before the emotion even builds by choosing your environment, like deciding, you know what, I'm just going to skip that notoriously conflict-heavy meeting entirely. Second is situation modification. You're in the situation, but you tweak it. Maybe you bring a supportive friend to a really stressful doctor's appointment to lower the tension. Third, attentional deployment. You can't change the situation, so you shift your focus, like putting on a fascinating podcast when you're stuck in a miserable, gridlocked commute. Fourth is cognitive change. This is where you reframe the meaning of the situation. Instead of seeing a failure as proof that you're incompetent, you reframe it as just useful data and feedback. Notice those first 4? They are all antecedent-focused. They happen before the emotion takes over completely. The final strategy is response modulation. The emotion has already started, so you manage your physical physiology, like forcing yourself to take slow, deep breaths after getting some bad news. And that brings us to Section 6, Thriving Under Pressure, Applying the Strategies. Because look, it's one thing to understand the academic theory. It is a totally different thing to actually apply it when the stakes are high and every fiber of your being is screaming at you to react impulsively. Take a hyper-volatile environment like professional financial trading. Market volatility ruthlessly exposes the gap between just knowing a strategy and actually acting on it. Look at how a pro applies these 5 steps in real time. If early action triggers panic, they use situation selection. They literally just refuse to trade the first hour the market is open. To use situation modification, they might reduce their position size to artificially lower the emotional stakes of a trade. For attentional deployment, they will actively force themselves to look away from that flashing red ticker for 60 seconds just to break the panic spiral. For cognitive change, they label a losing trade strictly as data for their system, not as proof that they're a terrible trader. And for response modulation, they have a strict rule: take 5 slow breaths after a loss before you are allowed to touch the keyboard again. The pressure doesn't disappear, but the regulation strategies keep them firmly in the driver's seat. So if you're going to focus on developing just one of these tools, which one gives you the best return on investment? Well, research consistently points to cognitive change, or reappraisal, as the absolute highest value skill. It allows you to change the meaning of an event before the negative emotion reaches full force. It turns the thought, "this proves I am failing," into, "okay, this is data and I can use it." And it's super vital to note here, this isn't about faking toxic positivity or lying to yourself. It's just about adopting a more accurate, less catastrophic reading of the exact same facts. At the end of the day, procrastination and impulsive reactions aren't character flaws. They're just a temporary failure to regulate our emotions in the face of friction. But now you actually have the map. You know exactly how to select your environment, modify your situations, deploy your attention, reframe your thoughts, and modulate your physical response. So the very next time you feel that friction, I want to leave you with this final provocative question to ask yourself. Will your emotions drive your next move, or will your process?